Hello, my name is Melissa Carrillo, and I will be doing this presentation on the history of mental illness and treatment. Today we will be speaking about five different persons. It's going to be Hippocrates, Johann Weyer, Dorothea Dix, Emil Kraepelin, and Sigmund Freud, specifically referring to ancient supernatural beliefs, asylums and humanitarian reforms, and moral treatment. Who is Hippocrates? We will be looking at this short clip to view who he was as a person.
Who in the world is Hippocrates? Well, Hippocrates c. 460 BC-c. 370 BC was an ancient Greek physician, considered one of the most outstanding figures in the history of medicine. He is referred to as the father of medicine in recognition of his lasting contributions to the field. He founded the Hippocratic School of Medicine, a system of medicine based on observing and recording symptoms and making treatment decisions based on the patient's individual condition. He was also the first to emphasize the importance of diet and exercise in maintaining health. Hippocrates' most famous contribution to medicine was the Hippocratic Oath, which all physicians still swear today. This oath outlines a code of ethics and moral responsibility for physicians, including respect for the patient's autonomy and confidentiality. He also wrote many medical works, including epidemics, on the sacred disease, on ancient medicine, and on AS, Walters, in places, which is considered one of the earliest works on public health. Hippocrates' legacy in medicine is profound. His works provided a foundation for the development of modern medicine, and his ethical principles are still seen in today's medical practice. He is remembered for his dedication to evidence-based medicine and his commitment to putting the patient's well-being first.
So we can see Hippocrates is a very good person. He wanted to help people and care for them in their toughest times, and he used physical and air and observations to this. Before getting into Hippocrates, the ancient foundations actually say that humans used to refer to mental illness as a superstition, where a mentally ill person was either possessed or touched by a god. I couldn't find which symptoms were for which, what deferred these two, but the treatment for both were very different and on opposite ends. A treatment for possession was an exorcism, torture, and death, where a treatment for being touched by a god was to be cared and protected for. No harm could be done to them. Hippocrates actually opposed the idea of possession and these other superstitious beliefs, such as magic and demons. His treatment referred to Plato's saying healthy mind in a healthy body, and he promoted the idea of physical exercise and diet. And it was actually founded that exercise as little as walking boosted cognitive attention control in children, and it served to improve academic performance. He was the first to classify mental disorders such as mania, melancholy, insanity, and paranoia, and a lot more. These mental illnesses were said to be treated more effectively when it was treated like physical conditions, which brings us to his humoral therapy. His attempt to find causes of diseases using physiology of the human body in addition to environmental factors. His treatment and diagnosis was based on observation and possible causes of imbalance in either of the four liquids. On the right side, we see the four liquids, which was yellow bile, black bile, phlegm, and blood. They were a little bit difficult to understand. However, what I understood was that when there was imbalance of these four liquids, then it caused issues or, different temperaments. So for example, too much black bile, which was a melancholic temperament, actually caused a malignant characteristic, which we know as narcissism. And the humoral theory continued up until the mid-19th century, where Breuer and Freud gave a psychological explanation rather than a physical one, which we know as psychoanalysis. But we will be getting into the asylums and humanitarian reforms before we do all that, where in the 1600s we saw the establishment of hospitals and sanatoriums, and they were seen as horrific today. In those times, they were a humane treatment. John Weyer was a Dutch physician, occultist, and demonologist. He was born in Grave in the small town in Netherlands. He attended Latin schools and became a live-in student of Heinrich Agrippa, and Agrippa completed work on demons. Agrippa had to leave, and soon after that, Weyer studied medicine in Paris and in Orleans. He never obtained a doctorate for these studies, but he did practice as a physician in his hometown, and he was appointed city physician. While he was city physician, he was asked about witchcraft in a 1548 court case, and this is where we see the different ideas that he had on demons and witchcraft. And after this, he published his book. His book was very controversial. It suggested that it was only against the Catholic Church and the manifestation of the devil. However, his book was the first indicator of mental illness. He published this book to argue that people at trial over witchcraft were actually being unlawfully tried and innocent. He claims that witchcraft was impossible, and anyone who said they were doing it were experiencing a mental disturbance. He thought that witchcraft was age and gender specific. I couldn't find anything for age, but gender he was referring to women. And on the left side, we do see his title page of his book. It's an actual picture of it. Next, we go on to Dorothea Dix. Not much history is known on her, but it was suggested that her parents suffered from alcoholism and she had an abusive father. Additionally, she went to school in Boston and she tutored kids at the same time. Throughout her life, she became ill many of times. Sorry about that. She became ill many of times, and during one of these times, her physician actually suggested that she travel to Europe. And when traveling to Europe, she met reforms that were trying to change the mentally ill care. And this gave her the idea to, after when she got back to the US, she wanted to go to the mental hospitals and see how the mentally ill were being cared for. And she was a voice for the imprisoned and insane. I have this video. It's a little disturbing and a little creepy. I'll play just a clip of it just to show what she wanted to do and why she was visiting these asylums.
Dix became the face of the 19th century prison reform. Prisons during this time period were damp, unregulated, unhealthy, unsafe, unsanitary, and overcrowded. All kinds of prisoners were held together: men, women, children, the insane, serious criminals, petty criminals, people awaiting trial, all housed side by side. Dix visited every public and private facility she could access, documenting the conditions she found with unwavering honesty. She then presented her findings to the legislature of Massachusetts, demanding that officials take action toward reform.
So, as we see, she was a voice for these prison people because mentally ill were seen as criminals, and they also included, these women, men, and children. They were all being held in the same place, and it caused a lot of danger in these places. So, after visiting the several mental hospitals, Dix reported to findings to politicians to cause a change and care for the unfortunate. While most politicians disagreed with her, she still founded 3 asylums, and even after this, a lot more in the US and abroad. Her first 3 were in New Jersey, North Carolina, and Illinois. On the right side, it's the first lunatic asylum that she did in New Jersey, which was in Trenton, if I'm not wrong. She was also known as Dragon Dix when she became the superintendent of Army nurses for the Union Army. Many believe that she set impossibly high standards, but these female nurses were very successful and it advanced their role during the war in medical field. This was very important in these times because nursing was a male-dominated field, so she was able to push for training and get opportunities for female nurses because it was known that male nurses were getting paid $20.50 at the time, and she was able to push for 40 cents for female nurses. I'm not sure how correct that information is, but that was very interesting to read about. During this time, she appointed more than 3,000 army nurses, and when she was recruiting these nurses, I think is very interesting. She had more of like a sexist idea to it, where she was recruiting ages to 35 to 50, and they needed to be quote unquote plain looking. They couldn't wear jewelry, makeup, or curls, or bowed dresses or skirts, which I thought was pretty interesting considering, she seemed more of like a female activist as well. Additionally, now we're going to get into the moral treatment. Um, Kraepelin was the first to classify mental disorders and set the stage for the DSM. He was a German psychiatrist. He was influenced by William Wundt, and he worked in his laboratory. He set the stage for the DSM when his clinical observations suggested specific combinations of symptoms which allowed identification of a particular mental disorder. This was seen when schizophrenia and manic depression were seen as the same, but he found that schizophrenia was biological and irreversible compared to manic depression, which didn't lead to permanent impaired brain function. Additionally, Freud, as we all know, was important for psychoanalysis. He said that mental illness as the unconscious process. And he did his findings when he heard about Anna O, which was a patient of Breuer. And we all know her story, so I won't, repeat all of that again. But Freud believed that her symptoms were due to repressed memories and traumas. And she set the stage when he saw that these symptoms lessened after she talked about her experiences and during catharsis. A very interesting fact that I learned about this is that she engaged in some type of transference where a patient's feelings for a significant person is redirected to the therapist. Freud saw this when Anna developed feelings and imagined herself pregnant with Breuer's child, which also wasn't the first encounter. She actually had many encounters like this where she suggested she wanted a relationship with Breuer, but Freud claims that Breuer was very ignorant to these signs, and he chose to ignore them. Thank you for listening. I just wanted to say, I think talking about the history of mental illness is very important because as therapists and future psychologists, psychiatrists, we need to be able to know this and be able to treat these people with care and warmth. And they weren't seen as this before, which I thought was very interesting to learn about. And, pretty much the timeline of it all, from going to witchcraft and superstition to being treated like human beings. So thank you so much for listening. And I hope you guys enjoyed my video.